May 14, 1948, 4:32 in the afternoon. In a museum hall in Tel Aviv, a man stood before a crowd and read 11 words that would change the world forever. We hereby proclaim the establishment of the Jewish state in Palestine, Israel. 11 hours later, 5 Arab armies crossed the border. This is the story of how the most contested nation in modern history came to exist, and why its birth still shapes our world today. To understand Israel's birth, you have to go back nearly 2,000 years. In 70 AD, the Roman Empire destroyed Jerusalem and scattered the Jewish people across the known world. Historians call it the Diaspora, the Great Dispersal. For centuries, Jewish communities lived across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East, always as minorities, always on the margins. By the 1800s, something was changing. Nationalism was sweeping Europe. Italians wanted an Italian state. Germans wanted a German state. And some Jewish intellectuals began asking a dangerous question. Why shouldn't the Jewish people have one too? But anti-Semitism was also rising, not fading. In Russia, violent pogroms, organized massacres of Jewish communities, were driving hundreds of thousands to flee. In France, a Jewish army officer named Alfred Dreyfus was publicly stripped of his rank in front of cheering crowds, falsely convicted of treason for no reason other than his religion.
A young journalist in the crowd that day took note. His name was Theodor Herzl, and what he witnessed would change everything. Theodor Herzl was not a religious man. He was a playwright, a journalist, a man of the modern world. But what he saw in Paris convinced him that assimilation was not the answer. That no matter how much Jewish people integrated into European society, they would always be seen as outsiders. In 1896, he published a slim, revolutionary pamphlet called Der Judenstaat, the Jewish state. The idea was simple. The Jewish people needed a country of their own. A real state with borders, an army, a government. Most people laughed. Herzl was dismissed as a dreamer, a madman. He didn't care. The following year, he organized the first Zionist Congress in Basel, Switzerland. 204 delegates from 17 countries gathered in a concert hall. Jews from Russia, from Germany, from England, from America. After it ended, Herzl wrote privately in his diary, "At Basel, I founded the Jewish state. If I said this out loud today, I would be answered by universal laughter. Perhaps in 5 years, and certainly in 50, everyone will see it." He was off by 2 years. He died in 1904 at just 44. 44 years later, almost to the day, Israel declared independence. World War I changed everything. The Ottoman Empire, which had controlled Palestine for 4 centuries, was collapsing. Britain was fighting on multiple fronts and needed allies. And so, on November 2nd, 1917, the British Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour sent a letter, a single page, addressed to Lord Walter Rothschild, a leader of the British Jewish community. It read, in part, "His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people." 77 words. That's all it took to set the Middle East on a path toward 100 years of conflict. The problem? Britain had also promised Arab leaders independence across the same region if they helped defeat the Ottomans. 2 promises. 1, land. A contradiction that would take generations to explode. Jewish immigration to Palestine began to increase. Arab residents who had lived there for generations grew alarmed. By the 1920s, violent clashes were already beginning. The fuse had been lit. After the war, the League of Nations handed Britain control of Palestine. It was called a mandate. Britain would govern the territory while preparing it for self-rule. In practice, it meant trying to manage 2 communities who increasingly wanted the same land. with opposite visions for its future. Jewish immigration surged through the 1920s and 30s. Entire neighborhoods, cities, newspapers, universities, a state within a state, were being built. The Hebrew language, dormant for centuries, was revived as a living tongue. But Arab Palestinians saw this not as renaissance, but as displacement. Riots erupted in 1929. A full Arab revolt broke out from 1936 to 1939. Britain, desperate to maintain peace, and Arab oil began to restrict Jewish immigration. In 1939, the White Paper almost entirely shut the doors to Jewish refugees entering Palestine. Then came the war, and everything changed again. 6 million. That is the number that reshaped history. When the full scale of the Holocaust became known after 1945, the world was confronted with a question it could no longer avoid. What would happen to the survivors? The displaced persons camps of Europe held hundreds of thousands of Jewish refugees with nowhere to go. Countries, including the United States, severely limited immigration. The Zionist movement had its answer. Ships packed with Holocaust survivors attempted to break through the British naval blockade to reach Palestine. The most famous, the Exodus, carried 4,500 refugees and was turned back by British warships. Images of the ship broadcast across the world turned international opinion sharply against Britain's policy. In 1947, an exhausted Britain handed the problem to the newly formed United Nations. On November 29, 1947, the UN voted on Resolution 181, the Partition Plan. It would divide Palestine into a Jewish state and an Arab state, with Jerusalem under international control. The vote: 33 in favor, 13 against, 10 abstentions. Jewish communities around the world danced in the streets. Arab leaders rejected it completely. The countdown to war had begun. The British mandate officially ended on May 15th. Jewish leaders chose to act one day early. At exactly 4 p.m. on May 14th, 1948, David Ben-Gurion stood beneath a portrait of Theodor Herzl in Tel Aviv's Independence Hall. He spoke for 32 minutes. He read the Declaration of Independence of the State of Israel, a document that spoke of equality for all citizens regardless of religion, and called on Arab neighbors for peace. 11 minutes after the ceremony ended, President Harry Truman's White House issued a statement. The United States recognized the new state over the objections of his own State Department, which feared it would destabilize the region. 3 days later, the Soviet Union recognized Israel too. But as the delegates were still signing the declaration, the armies were already moving. Egypt, Transjordan, Syria, Iraq, and Lebanon all declared war within hours. The 1948 Arab-Israeli War. Israelis call it the War of Independence. Palestinians call it the Nakba. The catastrophe had begun. Against every prediction, Israel survived. More than that, it expanded beyond the UN partition boundaries. 700,000 Palestinian Arabs fled or were expelled during the fighting. The refugee crisis that followed is unresolved to this day. By the time armistice agreements were signed in 1949, the map of the Middle East had been permanently redrawn. Theodor Herzl once wrote in his diary, "If you will it, it is no dream." Those words are carved into the stone of his tomb on a hill in Jerusalem. The State of Israel exists. That much is settled history. But nearly everything else about this story remains alive, contested, and unresolved. The questions born in 1948, of borders, of refugees, of competing claims to the same land, are the same questions making headlines today. This was not a simple story of heroes and villains. It was a collision of two peoples, each with legitimate history, each with genuine suffering, and each with an unshakable claim to the same small stretch of land. Understanding how we got here is the first step toward understanding anything that comes next. If this video meant something to you, subscribe, leave a comment, tell me what you think. History isn't just the past, it's the argument that never ended.